of their lack of financial when Jessica loved Eason's musical Get It Together, and as Brett was what and if financial in order to keep and Eason was left up Bree and Eason's lives went on. Hey guys, welcome to BookBabeBeauty, and if you've never seen any of my videos before, I love books and makeup. I especially love to give you guys a review on a great book that I just read while I do my makeup. This book, it was so good. I know I always say this, but I am so excited about this book that I'm reviewing today. It is another review for a romance novel, but damn, this story was a one of a kind. If you haven't read this book yet, then you're definitely in for a treat because this story was one hell of a ride from beginning to end. It's another one of those stories where heartbreaking tragedy turns to second chances at love, then turns to romantic thriller and suspense novel. And once again, I hadn't done any research on this book before I started reading it, so the journey was authentically surprising with each turn of the page. And the book I am talking about today is called From the Embers by Aly Martinez. Let me also say that I had some idea that this story was going to be a single dad romance novel, as it was clearly labeled as such in my Kindle app, but it was certainly no ordinary novel of that trope. It was very atypical of what I thought I would read when I saw that descriptive title. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you can expect if you decide to pick this book up, a little bit about the characters, and a little bit about the author who wrote this story. I'm ready to put my makeup on and talk a little bit about this story, so let's get started. The story starts out in the first-person narrative of a man named Eason Maxwell. What we know as the book opens up is that there seems to be some kind of long-endured hostility between he and his wife. In the present day, his wife Jessica expresses her disdain for his career choice and how it's not led him to the success that she expected at this point. See, Eason is a musician. More accurately, he is a songwriter whose dream is to catch a break singing the hits that he's penned for so long. Having been pretty successful at selling his songs to other more successful musicians, his true desire is to finally sing of all the emotions that he's documented on paper in lyrical fashion. But after several years of failed attempts, spending much of his free time in his garage turned quasi-recording studio, his wife Jessica has grown very tired of their lack of financial stability. There had been a time not very long ago when Jessica loved Eason's musical side and the spontaneity that it often brought with it. But after having their first and only child, Luna, Jessica begged Eason for more consistency and stability. Bills had started piling up. They no longer had the money to enjoy the things that they once used to. And Jessica feared that they would soon lose their house. Her wish was for Eason to start selling his songs again and to give up the dream of singing them himself. Of course, there was some slight resentment on Eason's part. He'd been the one to afford them the life that they had because of his music. And what she now despised was what once attracted her to him. It was hard for him not to consider, too, that as nervous as Jessica was over the mountain of bills, she wasn't exactly offering to help ease the stress by getting a job. But Eason was a good guy, and as much as it pained him, he loved his wife. Even more, he loved his daughter. If financial stability was what was needed to keep this family afloat, then he'd do what he had to do, dreams aside. After the argument between he and Jessica that had Eason placing his dreams on hold, they'd planned to host a game night with their best friends Rob and Bree. Eason had been best friends with Rob for quite some time, and similarly, Jessica and Bree had been too. Having 2 kids of their own, Bree and Rob were in need of some adult time too. And since Bree and Rob had the money to afford a sitter for the night, they offered for Eason and Jessica to bring their daughter Luna over so that the Maxwell house would be free of responsibility. As best friends often do, Jessica and Bree often shared their struggles and rants, which seemed to currently be the financial state that Jessica was in because of Eason. And like best friends often do too, Bree sided with her best friend Jessica that Eason needed to step up to the plate and provide some stability for his family. So it's safe to say that there weren't exactly any warm fuzzies between Bree and Eason. In fact, they tolerated each other at best. But that night, what was supposed to be a fun night of Pictionary while the kids were tucked away at Bree and Rob's, was a night full of catastrophic tragedy at Eason and Jessica's. In the blink of an eye, an explosion erupted as the Maxwell residence was set aflame. Having fallen from the 2nd story of the room that they were in playing games, a disoriented Eason only had his mind on one goal. His goal was to find everyone and get them to safety. However, the only person that he could locate within the flaming rubble was his wife, seemingly lifeless on the ground floor. And as panic flooded him, his best bet was to get his wife a safe distance from the burning house, and then come back to find the others. But as he brought his wife to a grassy area, a safe distance from the threat of the fire, devastating reality hit him, because the person that he'd saved first was not his wife at all. It was Bree. And as the seconds passed, it was becoming all too clear that he'd made a grave mistake. Because as the flames grew higher, a second explosion went off, leaving him with no choice but to watch as the burning house crumbled on top of his wife and his best friend. Now that I've stopped at a really intense part of the book, I'm going to go ahead and put my eyebrows on off camera, and I will be right back. I'm back and my eyebrows are done. Before I start talking about the story again, I'm just going to introduce a new eyeshadow palette that I got. It is another Colourpop eyeshadow palette, but like I've said before, I love Colourpop. They're super affordable. Their eyeshadows are super dependable and super blendable. They're really great. So I love Colourpop. Anyway, this is one of their newest palettes. Again, it's probably old news at this point because Colourpop releases a new palette like every other day. I love the colors in it, but I wanted to use it for today's video because the book cover for this book is so colorful and just felt inspired by the book cover. So today's palette is the Colourpop Cabana Club Palette, and the color story is just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm excited to use that today. That's what I'm going to use. Now, let's get back to the story. 2 families were torn apart by a tragedy that one could never predict. And 3 children were now unfortunately left with only one surviving parent each. And two adults who held the kind of grief now that only you could with survivor's guilt. Eason's only thought shortly after the tragedy was that he'd saved the wrong person. Bree's only thought was that they should have tried harder to save their spouses and their best friends. With not even a broken bone for either of them, they had nothing to show for the explosion that tore their lives apart. And Eason was left to pick up the pieces of what little he had left. He had no home to go back to, no belongings, and nothing of Jessica's to comfort him after the fire ravaged everything they owned. But he did have his daughter, and if there ever was a silver lining to such a tragedy, Luna was definitely it. And Bree, on the other hand, was now a single mom of 2. Yes, she still had her home, but the memories of her husband were still scattered around the rooms, as if he'd come home at any moment and they'd pick up where they left off. It was all too much for the two of them to process. And as much as she wasn't a fan of Eason, she knew how close he was to Rob. She couldn't bear the thought of kicking him to the curb when he'd had nothing to his name. And she couldn't bear leaving him stranded with no roof over his head when he'd had a daughter to care for. Now, Eason was a proud man, and he was not fond of handouts. But when Bree proposed that he and Luna stay in the pool house until he could get back on his feet, he had no choice but to accept. He knew that Luna didn't deserve the inconsistencies of staying on a new couch every few nights until he could get his footing again. Bree and Eason's lives went on the best that they could for the first few months, and they quickly grew to lean on each other for support in a lot of ways. Their tragedy had seemed to forge a friendship between them, and a bond that only they could understand. They were now single parents to 3 children who had one less parent, and Eason struggled to figure out what he was supposed to do with his life. Music had always been a part of Eason's life, but he no longer had the luxury to pursue creating it. He needed to put a roof over he and Luna's head and put food on the table. And Bree still had the successful company that she created, yet had left her husband to run for her, now left her picking up the pieces to this company that she no longer had a passion for, but unfortunately needed in order to support her family. So when Bree came up with the arrangement for Eason to watch the kids during the day while she ran the business, so that he could pursue music at night while she cared for the kids when she got home, this tag team operation managed to give them some sort of semblance of their lives again. They had a partnership in parenting, and though it wasn't always easy with their completely opposite methods of parenting, they were successful at it. And more importantly, they seemed to be successful at giving the kids a happy life, deceased parents aside. Bree and Eason had even managed to carve out some time every night to sit by the unlit fire pit and express all of their worries and stresses to each other, their bond continuing to grow during their nightly routine. Bree also began to realize that she had seriously misjudged Eason. She'd come to find that he had an incredible heart, and even as much as Jessica had complained about Eason's inability to provide financial stability, Bree was able to see that his passion for music wasn't an unreachable dream. She was able to see what an amazing father he was, not only to his daughter Luna, but to her 2 children, Madison and Asher, as well. He stepped up in ways that Bree never imagined he could, especially after losing so much himself. And Eason began to see that Bree wasn't the cold and distant person that he once thought he'd known. She wasn't exactly spontaneous by nature, but Eason brought that spontaneity out in her. She loved all 3 children with her entire heart, and Eason was able to see that more compassionate side to her. Their realizations of each other sparked an attraction that surprised them both. But they were hesitant to act on that attraction because a part of them still felt like it was a betrayal to Rob and Jessica. Their arrangement was working out so well for them that they were afraid to ruin it all with a failed connection. Being friends was safer and less complicated for the children that relied on them for security. But when Eason and Bree discovered a secret that Rob had taken to his grave, they suffered an even bigger, unimaginable loss. Eason started to question his reality and whether or not his actions in the present even mattered anymore. And Bree began to question her judge of character and whether or not she'd even known her husband at all. Hit after hit of emotional tragedy led Eason and Bree to lean on each other even more. And it was up to them to figure out how the pieces of their lives even fit back together. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of my makeup on off camera. When I come back, I will wrap it up with my final thoughts and opinions about this book and give you a little information about the author who wrote it. I will be right back. I am back and my makeup is done. I just have to say, this palette by Colourpop is one of my favorite ones. The shadows are so pigmented. I feel like I can do so much with it. If you've had your eye on this palette, I have nothing but good things to say about it. I think it is one of Colourpop's better palettes, in my opinion. But the look I created today was really inspired by the cover of the book. It's just a fun and creative way to express what this story is about. So anyway, let's get back to the story. As the title description implied, this story is a single dad romance novel. But this story was so much more than that. It was a story of second chances, a story of love after loss, a story of happiness after tragedy, and a story of pursuing dreams even after facing immense adversity. The bond that Eason and Bree formed was because of such unfortunate circumstances. Yet it seemed like fate had their story written in the stars from the beginning. Their relationship proved that happiness could still be found even after facing incident after incident that left them feeling like their hearts would never heal. And it was because of everything that they'd faced together and the friendship that started to form because of the common goal of raising 3 kids who'd also suffered immeasurable loss that made their relationship ultimately stronger in the end. The mutual love that inevitably grew between them had more to do with the content of their character than a superficial attraction to each other. It truly made their story not only beautiful, but also inspiring. Eason was definitely a male character made for swooning over. He was just a good man who'd have honestly every reason to be a cynical person given everything that had been thrown at him. And Bree was a female character made for empowering because although she too suffered similar losses to those of Eason, she became his rock, and she really pushed him to reach for the stars when it came to his music. Despite the responsibilities of her life and career overwhelming her, they truly made for a perfect team. And the kids were so cute. I loved how appropriately they were written given their age because I feel like it gave a lot of authenticity to the story. This novel was written by Aly Martinez, who is yet again another new to me author, and you guys know I love finding new authors to read from. It's like my life's goal. But she is an author who has officially won my heart over, and I will be adding every single one of her books to my TBR list. And if I'm not mistaken, I think she's written about 30 books. I kind of had a hard time counting because she has quite a few series and she also has a lot of box sets listed. So I was kind of seeing double and I just was getting easily confused. But I know she's written a lot, so there's plenty of stories to choose from. According to her website bio, Aly Martinez is originally from Savannah, Georgia, and she currently resides in South Carolina with her husband and 4 children. And hot damn, girl, you are a superwoman, because I can barely remember to eat with 2 children, and you done published 30 books with 4. And she's a best-selling author. You go, girl. I highly, highly recommend this book. As I am just going to say this book goes on the top of my list as one of my favorite books this year. I would never tell you to read a book that I didn't like. So all of the other books in my other videos I have absolutely loved. But I think this story truly is one of my all-time favorites. This book is available on Kindle Unlimited for all of you KU subscribers, so it can be read for free. And if you have read this book, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. I'm so curious if you loved it as much as I did. If you haven't read this book, be sure to check in the description box for a link where you can find this book on Amazon. If you guys have any book suggestions for me, you know I love to hear your suggestions. Please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I am always open to suggestions for books to put on my TBR list. And if you're an author and you want me to read your book, check out my website. The link is listed below in the description box as well. And fill out a form. Don't be shy, y'all. You never know. You could see one of your books in a future video. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more books and makeup, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your time and for your support. I sincerely hope that you guys have taken some of my book suggestions, found a great book that you've loved, and help support an author in the process. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Y'all stay safe out there, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.